I watched my stepsister Vanessa's hands tremble as she held the auction catalog, her perfectly manicured fingers leaving sweat marks on the glossy paper. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the prestigious Huntington Gallery, crisp and professional. Lot 47, Moonlight Serenade, oil on canvas, 48 by 36 inches. Opening bid, $1 million. Vanessa's face drained of color. My stepmother Margaret clutched the armrest of her seat, her knuckles white. They'd come here expecting to pay off Vanessa's catastrophic gambling debts with what they thought were my worthless little paintings, the ones they'd pressured me to donate to this charity auction, the ones they'd sneered at for years. They had no idea who I really was. 1 million. A paddle rose in the back. A woman in an elegant black dress, someone I recognized from the contemporary art world. 1.2 million, another voice called out. I sat 3 rows behind them, wearing a simple navy dress and wide-brimmed hat, invisible as I'd always been to them. But not to the art world. Never again. 1.5 million. The bidding continued, rapid fire, climbing higher with each breath. Margaret turned to Vanessa, her whisper carrying in the hushed room. What's happening? You said she was barely competent. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like thunder. Sold for $2.4 million to paddle 156. 4 more of my paintings waited in the queue, and my family was about to learn what it meant to underestimate Alara Chen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how I got here. Both lives of it. 23 years ago, my mother died giving birth to me. My father, William Chen, a moderately successful businessman, remarried within 2 years to Margaret, a woman with a daughter just 1 year older than me, Vanessa. From the beginning, I was the unwanted variable in their perfect equation. Margaret made it clear. I was a reminder of the first wife, an inconvenience, a financial burden. Vanessa was the princess. I was Cinderella without the fairy godmother. I grew up in the smallest room of our 6-bedroom house, wearing Vanessa's hand-me-downs, even though my father could easily afford new clothes for both of us. I ate after everyone else finished, sometimes finding only scraps left. I studied under a broken lamp while Vanessa had a designer desk set up with professional lighting. When I was 7, I discovered painting. A teacher noticed my doodles and gave me her old watercolor set. I fell in love instantly, with color, with form, with the way I could create beauty from nothing. It was the only thing that was truly mine. Margaret found my paintings when I was 8. I'd hidden them under my bed, dozens of studies of our garden, the sky, Vanessa's cat. She looked through them with cold eyes and said, Vanessa needs practice for her art class. She can copy these. I learned early that nothing I created belonged to me. In my first life, the one that ended on a rainy October night when I was 28, I spent 2 decades as my family's ghost artist. Every award Vanessa won in high school, my work. Her college portfolio that got her into a prestigious arts program, mine. The paintings she sold at her emerging artist shows, all mine. My father knew. He had to know, but he never intervened. Every time I tried to speak up, Margaret would create some crisis. Vanessa was sick, the business needed him, I was being selfish and ungrateful. I learned to be quiet, to be invisible, to paint in the dark hours between midnight and dawn, to hand over my work like tribute, to watch Vanessa bask in praise that should have been mine. The worst part? I loved painting too much to stop. Even knowing my work would be stolen, I couldn't not create. It was like breathing. I put myself through a state college with 3 jobs while living at home. They refused to pay, but also refused to let me move out. They needed their artist. I took online courses in art history and technique. I taught myself by studying the masters, by painting thousands of hours. I developed a signature style, hyper-realistic paintings with subtle magical elements, where light seemed to move and shadows told stories. Vanessa took all the credit, built an entire career on my back. Then came the final betrayal. I'd been commissioned, secretly using a pseudonym I'd created online, to paint a series for a major gallery. 12 paintings, my best work ever, pieces of my soul on canvas. I'd hidden them in a storage unit, paid for with money from my day job as a graphic designer. Vanessa found out. I don't know how. Maybe she'd followed me. Maybe she'd hacked my email. She stole my keys, emptied the unit, and submitted the paintings under her name to the International Contemporary Art Prize. She won $500,000 in prize money, instant global recognition, gallery shows booked for 3 years. I confronted her. My father and Margaret stood beside her. "You're delusional, Ilara," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false concern. "This obsession isn't healthy. Vanessa is the artist. Your support staff. Accept your place." My father wouldn't meet my eyes. "Stop making trouble. Family takes care of family." "Then let me be family," I shouted, years of silence breaking. "Let me be seen. Those paintings are mine, and you all know it." Vanessa smiled, sweet as poison. "Prove it." "Oh, wait, you can't. Because I have the documentation, the process photos, the preliminary sketches. All you have are delusions." She thought of everything, or rather, Margaret had. They'd created an entire false paper trail while I was at work. I tried to fight, hired a lawyer with money I didn't have, but without proof, without witnesses, without anything but my word against theirs, the case went nowhere. The stress, the betrayal, the sheer weight of it crushed me. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, painted frantically, trying to create new proof, new evidence, but everything I made they claimed was practice or copying Vanessa's style. On October 15th, driving home from my fourth job at a 24-hour diner, exhausted beyond measure, I didn't see the truck running the red light. The impact was instantaneous. Pain, then darkness, then I woke up in my childhood bed, 14 years old, staring at my hands, young hands, unscarred, unpainted. The calendar on my wall read 3 months before my first painting was discovered by Margaret and stolen by Vanessa. I laid there for 3 hours, memories of 2 timelines warring in my head. The therapist I saw in my first life had talked about memory, how vivid dreams could feel real, how the mind played tricks. But this was no dream. I knew things I couldn't know. The exact date of Vanessa's appendicitis next summer, the stock that would split and make early investors rich, the lottery numbers from my father's birthday next year that he'd play and lose. And I knew exactly how my family would betray me for the next 14 years. Not this time. I got up, locked my door, and started planning. The thing about Rebirth is that knowledge is only powerful if you know how to use it. I was 14, legally a child, financially dependent on people who despised me. I couldn't just run away or expose them, not yet. I needed to be strategic, patient, and I needed to think like them. First, I took my painting underground. In my first life, I'd been naive, showing my work openly, hoping for recognition. Now, I created a fake identity. Online platforms were just beginning to explode. I created multiple email accounts, a website under the name EC Noctis, and started posting my work. But I made one crucial change. I documented everything, every step of my process. Time-stamped videos of me painting, saved on multiple cloud accounts, sketches with DNA-tagged paper, I'd read about the technology, photos of works in progress with newspapers showing the date. I created an unbreakable chain of evidence. Second, I let them think they were still winning. When Margaret discovered my paintings a few months later, I played the same meek role. I handed them over. Let Vanessa submit them to competitions. But this time, I painted them slightly differently. Good enough to win regional awards, but not my best work. My true masterpieces went to EC Noctis, building a reputation in the online art world. Third, I started making money. The internet was a goldmine for a skilled artist. I did commissions, sold digital art, created tutorials, all under pseudonyms, all documented, all deposited into accounts Margaret and my father didn't know existed. By 16, I had $50,000 saved. By 18, $200,000. I invested carefully, using knowledge from my first life. By 21, I had enough to be independent, but I stayed because I wasn't done. I watched. Vanessa built her career on my deliberately mediocre paintings. I watched her get into art school, the same one from my first life, on a portfolio I designed to be good but not exceptional. I watched my father write check after check for her education, her supplies, her lifestyle. and I watched her develop a gambling problem. It started in college, poker games, then online betting, then Vegas trips. In my first life, I'd barely known about it. I was too busy working myself to death. But now I paid attention, watched her spiral, watched Margaret cover for her, draining her own accounts, then my father's business funds. I could have warned them, could have intervened. I didn't. By the time I was 27, 28 in soul, 14 years wiser, Vanessa was $500,000 in debt to some very serious people. Margaret had depleted her savings covering for her. My father's business was struggling. He'd made some bad investments I'd deliberately suggested through a business consultant, alias. And E.C. Noctis was one of the most sought-after contemporary artists in the underground art world, with pieces selling for hundreds of thousands to private collectors who valued anonymity over fame. The trap was set. I just needed them to walk into it. The opportunity came on a Tuesday. Vanessa burst into the house. I'd moved back after struggling to find work post-college, another strategic choice, screaming about debt collectors, about threats, about needing money immediately. Margaret was frantic. "William, we need to liquidate something. The house is mortgaged to the ceiling," my father said, looking older than his years. "The business barely breaks even. I don't know what to do." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been job hunting. "What about a fundraiser or an auction?" They all turned to me, surprised I'd spoken. "What do you mean?" Margaret asked, her tone suspicious. "Vanessa's built a reputation as an artist." The words tasted like ash, but I smiled. "What if we donate some paintings to a charity auction? It's tax deductible and it might raise money. There's a big one coming up at the Huntington Gallery. They accept submissions until Friday." I watched them process this, watched greed and desperation war with their ingrained dismissal of any idea from me. "My paintings are worth serious money," Vanessa said, defensive. "I'm not giving them away." "The ones you've already sold, yes," I interrupted gently. "But what about the ones I've been making? You could submit them under your name like always. Charity auctions attract wealthy buyers feeling generous. It might work." The silence was deafening. "You'd do that?" my father asked. "Just give them to Vanessa?" I shrugged, the picture of defeated resignation. "What else am I good for? Family helps family, right?" Margaret's eyes narrowed, but desperation won. "How many paintings?" "I have 7 finished pieces. In my room, good ones." I'd made sure they were good, not my best, but impressive enough to attract attention. "We could say they're from Vanessa's new collection." Over the next 3 days, I watched them take my paintings, photograph them, create auction listings. I helped write the descriptions, making sure to note certain details. The signature hidden in the corner, the date stamps subtly incorporated into the imagery, the unique varnish technique I'd developed. The auction house was confused when they received the submission. "These are quite different from Ms. Chen's usual style," the curator said on the phone, which I overheard. "More sophisticated, almost like—" "Where did you study this technique, Ms. Chen?" Vanessa, on speaker, stumbled through an explanation about evolution and finding her voice. They accepted the paintings, though I could hear skepticism in the curator's voice. What Vanessa and Margaret didn't know was that I'd sent an anonymous tip to the auction house 3 weeks earlier, from E.C. Noctis, saying that I'd be submitting work under a different name to test the market's reaction to my art without the influence of my established reputation, asking them to authenticate carefully and to spread word among serious collectors that something special would be available. The curator, an old-school art expert named Dr. Vivian Hughes, who'd been following E.C. Noctis for years, had examined my paintings personally. She'd found every authentication marker I'd embedded. And she'd made some calls. The auction was set for Saturday, 5 days away. I spent those days watching my family celebrate their solution. Vanessa was already planning how to spend the imagined money. Maybe $50,000, she guessed, if they were lucky. Margaret talked about paying off the most dangerous debts first. My father looked relieved that he wouldn't lose the business. None of them asked me how I felt about giving away 7 paintings that represented hundreds of hours of work. To them, I was a machine, a tool, not a person. Perfect. Saturday arrived with clear skies and cool autumn air. The Huntington Gallery was one of the most prestigious venues in the city, all marble columns and soaring ceilings. I'd told my family I had to work a fake catering job I'd invented, so they didn't question my absence from the family group. I arrived early, dressed simply, and took a seat in the back. I watched wealthy collectors file in, gallery owners, art critics, museum curators. This was a high-stakes event, not some small-time charity auction. The Huntington only did one major auction per year, and attendance was exclusive. Dr. Hughes spotted me and gave the tiniest nod. We'd met once, secretly 2 years ago. She was the only person who knew E.C. Noctis's true identity, bound by an NDA and professional ethics. She was also someone who despised art fraud and had her own reasons for wanting to see justice done. My family arrived at the 20 idea, minutes before the auction started. Vanessa wore a designer dress she'd put on credit. Margaret dripped in jewelry. My father looked uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo. They found seats in the front row, preening, imagining they belonged. The auction began with minor pieces, small sculptures, prints, photographs, standard charity auction fare. Prices were good, 10 to 50,000 per lot, but nothing spectacular. Then came lot 45, one of Vanessa's real paintings from her college years, actually mine, from my first life, a landscape she'd submitted to her thesis show. It had been donated by the college itself. Opening bid, $5,000. It sold for $8,000. Vanessa beamed. Margaret patted her hand. Lot 46 was a contemporary piece by a local favorite, $12,000. Then the energy in the room changed. Lot 47, my first painting of the 7. Moonlight Serenade. Dr. Hughes herself took the podium, which was unusual. Ladies and gentlemen, we have something special tonight. The next 7 lots are pieces from an artist who has chosen to reveal themselves in a unique way. I've had the privilege of authenticating these works, and I can say with absolute certainty that they represent some of the finest contemporary art I've seen in my 40-year career. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Serious collectors leaned forward. These paintings contain verifiable elements linking them to the artist known as E.C. Noctis, whose work has been highly sought after in private circles for over a decade. Tonight marks the first public auction of authenticated Noctis pieces. The room exploded in whispers. E.C. Noctis was legendary in certain circles. Mysterious, reclusive, brilliant. Collectors had been trying to acquire works for years, but I'd kept my sales extremely limited and private. Vanessa's face went from confused to pale. Margaret gripped her arm. Opening bid for Moonlight Serenade, $1 million. I watched my stepsister's world shatter in real time. The painting showed a woman playing violin under moonlight, but if you looked closely, the moon itself held a reflection of a girl in a cage painting. The violin strings spelled out coordinates that, when mapped, pointed to our family home. The woman's shadow was signing an ASL. I am here, I am real, see me. Every element was documented in my E.C. Noctis archives, created years before this moment. The bidding was fierce. Collectors who'd been waiting years for a chance at my work weren't going to lose this opportunity. $2.4 million. The number echoed in the silence after the gavel fell. Margaret's hand shot up, trying to get the auctioneer's attention. Wait! There's been a mistake! That's my daughter's painting! Dr. Hughes smiled, sharp as a blade. I assure you, Mrs. Chen, there's no mistake. We have extensive documentation proving the provenance of these works. They were all created by E.C. Noctis, whose legal identity is verified and on file. If your daughter claims to have painted this, I suggest you have her demonstrate the technique. The hidden signature alone requires knowledge of a process that takes years to master. My daughter, Vanessa, can... Margaret sputtered. Shall we continue? Dr. Hughes asked the room, ignoring her. Lot 48. The Theft of Light. This painting showed 2 women, one in shadow stealing stars from the other's hands while the second slept. The sleeping woman's face was blurred, but her clothing and the room around her were exactly like my childhood bedroom. The thief's reflection in a mirror showed her face clearly, Vanessa's face. Opening bid, $1 million. Stop this! Vanessa stood up, her voice shrill. Those are mine. I painted them. A tall woman in the front row turned around, Isabella Moreau, one of the most influential collectors in the contemporary art world. Ms. Chen, I've been following EC Noctis for 8 years. I've seen the process videos, the documented progression. If you're claiming to be Noctis, then you should be thrilled at these prices. And if you're not, she let the implication hang. Final call for lot 48, Dr. Hughes said calmly. Sold for $3.1 million to Paddle 203. 5 more paintings to go. Each one told a piece of my story. The golden cage showed a bird made of paint and light, trapped in a gilded cage held by elegant hands dripping with blood. Family portrait depicted 3 figures with their backs turned to a fourth, who was dissolving into starlight. The debt showed a woman drowning in paper bills while another danced on the surface, oblivious. Every single painting sold for over $1 million. The cheapest went for $1.8 million. The most expensive, Renaissance, a self-portrait showing me emerging from darkness into light, surrounded by every painting I'd ever created floating like guardian angels, sold for $5.7 million. Total from 7 paintings, $21.3 million. Every penny designated for the charity of the donor's choice. And EC Noctis had specified the Youth Art Foundation, which provided free art supplies and classes to underprivileged children, the same foundation I'd volunteered at for years. As the final gavel fell, security guards I'd arranged beforehand, with Dr. Hughes's help, moved toward my family. Not to arrest them, that would come later, but to escort them out as they'd become disruptive to the auction. I stood up, removed my hat, and walked down the aisle. The room fell silent as people recognized me. The invisible 4th member of the Chen family, the one who'd served drinks at gallery openings for Vanessa's shows, who'd been in the background of a dozen art world events. My father saw me first. His face went gray. "Hello, Father," I said softly. "Margaret, Vanessa." "You," Vanessa hissed. "You set us up." "No," I corrected. "I painted 7 works of art from my soul and let you try to profit from them, just like you've been doing my entire life. The only difference is that this time, the world knows they're mine." Dr. Hughes joined me, along with 2 lawyers I'd hired months ago. "Mrs. Chen, Ms. Vanessa Chen, we have documentation proving that you've been fraudulently claiming credit for works created by Ms. Alara Chen for approximately 13 years. We have testimony from classmates, teachers, and art professionals. We have EC Noctis's complete archive, including time-stamped videos showing the creation of every piece Vanessa has ever claimed as her own. We have DNA evidence on canvases, and we have witnesses." She gestured to the crowd. 3 of Vanessa's college classmates stood up. People who'd been suspicious, but afraid to speak up. A high school teacher, 2 gallery owners who'd always thought Vanessa's style was inconsistent. "We're prepared to file both criminal and civil charges," one of my lawyers said. "Art fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation. But Ms. Alara Chen has authorized me to offer you a choice." I stepped forward. "You can fight this, drag it through courts for years, spend money you don't have, and ultimately lose when the evidence buries you. Vanessa will be blacklisted from the art world forever. Margaret, you'll be charged as an accomplice. Father, your business will collapse under the scandal." I paused, letting that sink in. "Or you can sign a confession, admit what you did, return every penny you made from my work with interest, publicly clear my name, and walk away with nothing but your shame." "You can't do this," Margaret whispered. "You're our daughter. Family takes care of family," I finished. "You taught me that." "But I was never family to you, was I? I was a resource to be exploited." Vanessa lunged at me, but security held her back. "You're ruining everything. I built a career. I have a reputation." "You have my reputation," I corrected. "Built on my talent, my work, my sleepless nights, every award, every gallery show, every single piece of recognition. It was all mine. You just wore it like a stolen coat." My father finally spoke. "Alara, I'm sorry. I was weak. I should have protected you. Yes, I agreed. You should have. You had 14 years to be my father. You chose to be her bank instead. The lawyers laid out papers on a nearby table. Sign these and we won't press charges. Refuse and we'll see you in court Monday morning. You have 60 seconds to decide. I watched them break, watched Margaret's imperious mask crack, watched Vanessa's beauty queen's smile collapse into ugly crying, watched my father's shoulders slump in defeat. They signed. Every page, every admission, every return of funds, which would be seized from their accounts on Monday. The auction proceeds tonight, minus the charity's cut, total approximately $19 million after fees, Dr. Hughes announced to the room. As EC Noctis, Ms. Elara, Chen is donating the full amount to the Youth Art Foundation. She's also establishing a scholarship in her mother's name for young artists from difficult family situations. The applause started slowly, then built like thunder. I didn't smile. This wasn't about triumph. It was about justice. Security escorted my family out through a side door. I watched them go. 3 people who'd stolen years of my life, who'd taken my work and my worth and tried to erase me. I let them leave with nothing. The next 6 months were a blur. The story broke Monday morning. Every major art publication, news outlet, and social media platform covered it. Hidden genius exposed. The EC Noctis scandal. The art world was rocked. Vanessa's previous works were re-examined and every single one was traced back to me. Awards were revoked, gallery shows canceled. Her degree was reviewed by her university, which ultimately issued a statement that her thesis had been compromised by fraudulent submissions. The International Contemporary Art Prize, the one she'd won with my 12 paintings in my first life, reached out to me. Apparently, they'd been troubled by inconsistencies in her work. They offered to review any pieces I wanted to submit under my real name. I submitted the same 12 paintings, recreated from memory, and improved with my additional years of skill. I won. The prize had grown to $750,000. My father's business went bankrupt within weeks. The full extent of his financial mismanagement became public during the legal proceedings. He lost the house, the cars, everything. Last I heard, he was working as a middle manager at a company he used to compete with. Margaret tried to salvage something by selling her story to tabloids, positioning herself as a victim of my deception. It backfired spectacularly when the full evidence was released, including recorded phone calls where she discussed managing Elara's output and keeping the real artist quiet. Vanessa had a breakdown, not the sympathetic kind, the public, messy kind that burned every remaining bridge. She tried to start a new career under a different name, but the art world is smaller than people think. Someone always knows. She's working retail now, I hear, living with Margaret in a 1-bedroom apartment. I don't feel bad about that. As for me, the revelation of EC Noctis's identity created a feeding frenzy. Every piece I'd ever sold privately was now worth 10 times more. Collectors who'd bought my work anonymously came forward, proud to own authenticated Noctis originals. Museums wanted to exhibit my complete collection. I agreed to one show, at the Huntington Gallery, curated by Dr. Hughes. Rebirth, the complete works of Elara Chen, EC Noctis. It ran for 6 months, breaking attendance records. I sold 12 new paintings at my first official show under my real name. The cheapest went for $3 million. The most expensive, a massive piece, called The First Death, showing a woman drowning while her family watched from shore, sold for $12 million to a museum. But the money, the fame, the recognition, none of that was the real victory. The real victory was the email I got from a 17-year-old girl in Nebraska. She'd read my story and wanted me to know that she'd finally shown her parents her own paintings, the ones she'd been hiding because her brother was the talented one. She'd stood up for herself. I got hundreds of those emails, from invisible daughters, exploited siblings, underestimated children, people who'd seen themselves in my story and found the courage to claim their own worth. I started a foundation, not just for art supplies, but for legal support for young artists dealing with plagiarism and exploitation. I funded it with $10 million of my own money, and donors lined up to contribute more. I bought a studio in the Arts District, a massive, light-filled space where I painted every day, surrounded by windows, so the whole world could see me working. No more midnight sessions in secret, no more hiding. I hired assistants, young artists I mentored. I taught classes online, free for anyone who wanted to learn. I created a certification program to help artists document and protect their work, and every single painting I created bore my signature, bold and clear, in the bottom right corner. Alara Chen, EC, not Noctis. No one would ever steal my work again. 2 years after the auction, I was invited to speak at the International Art Summit in Paris. It was the first time I'd agreed to a major speaking engagement. I was nervous, painting was always easier than talking, but I had something to say. The ballroom was packed. Thousands of artists, from students to masters, filled every seat. I stood at the podium and looked out at them. "My name is Alara Chen," I began. "Some of you know me as E.C. Noctis. Some of you know me as the artist who was plagiarized by her own family for 14 years, but before all of that, I was just a 7-year-old girl who loved to paint. I told my story, both lives of it. The first life where I'd been crushed, where my family had stolen everything and I'd died broken and invisible. The second life where I'd been given the impossible gift of rebirth, of foreknowledge, of a chance to rewrite my story. People ask me if I regret not exposing them earlier, I said. If I regret letting them steal my work for years, even in the second chance, but I don't, because every painting they took, I learned from. Every theft made me better, sharper, more determined, and when the moment came, I didn't just expose them, I transcended them. I paused, gathering my thoughts. The greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so undeniably, brilliantly yourself that no one can ever diminish you again. It's taking everything they tried to steal and making it so powerfully yours that their very touch becomes evidence of their crime. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. If you're an artist being exploited, document everything. Protect your work, build your evidence. And when the time is right, step into the light so brightly that everyone who tried to keep you in shadow is blinded by your brilliance. I smiled, finally. They wanted me invisible, so I became unforgettable. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Afterward, at the reception, I was surrounded by well-wishers, by fellow artists, by people wanting to share their own stories. And standing near the back, watching with proud eyes, was Dr. Vivian Hughes, the curator who'd helped make my revelation possible. She raised her champagne glass to me. I raised mine back. Later, alone in my hotel room, I set up my traveling easel and started a new painting. Not for sale, not for show, just for me. It showed a girl rising from water, her hands full of stars, her face turned toward the sun. Behind her, 3 figures sank into darkness. She didn't look back at them. She didn't need to. She was free. I titled it The Second Life and hung it in my studio when I got home, above my desk where I could see it every morning. Some people only get one chance at life. I'd gotten 2, and I'd made damn sure the second one counted. 5 years after the auction, my life had settled into something I never imagined possible: peace. I lived in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, the walls covered in my own artwork, pieces I'd kept for myself, too personal to sell. My studio took up half the space, all glass walls and natural light. I painted when inspiration struck, which was often, but I never pushed myself to exhaustion anymore. Creation was joy again, not survival. My foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd helped over 3,000 young artists protect their work, provided legal support in 57 plagiarism cases, winning 54, and distributed millions in supplies and scholarships. The foundation's gala was coming up, and I'd be auctioning a new piece, all proceeds going to expand our programs internationally. I had friends now, real ones who knew me as Alara, not as a tool or a resource. Dr. Hughes and I had dinner monthly. I'd reconnected with old classmates who'd suspected but never known how to help. I'd even started dating a sculptor named Marcus who made me laugh and never once asked if he could have a painting for free. My father reached out once, about 3 years after everything fell apart. An email, carefully worded, asking if we could talk, apologizing, explaining that he'd been weak, that Margaret had manipulated him, that he'd always loved me but didn't know how to stand up to her. I thought about it for a week. Then I replied, "I believe you love the idea of me, but love without action is just words, and you had 14 years to act. I hope you find peace, but you won't find it with me. I forgive you for myself, not for you. Goodbye." Father? He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. Margaret and Vanessa existed somewhere in the world, but I'd blocked them on everything and asked my team to handle any attempts at contact. I heard through the grapevine that Vanessa had tried to rebrand as a performance artist whose work explored identity and authenticity, which was rich with irony. It failed. Margaret had published a book called The Price of Ambition, a memoir that tried to paint herself as a complicated woman driven by desperation. It sold 847 copies and got shredded by reviewers who'd followed the real story. I didn't care. They were footnotes in my story now, not the authors of it. The night before the foundation gala, I stood in my studio and looked at the painting I'd be auctioning, The Family I Choose. It showed a table surrounded by people, artists, mentors, friends, all holding hands, their faces turned toward light streaming through windows. In the corner, barely visible, 3 shadows faded into the wallpaper. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Ready for tomorrow? The art world is going to go crazy for this piece. I smiled and replied, let them, I'm ready. And I was. The gala was spectacular. 500 guests, including major collectors, museum curators, philanthropists, and artists from around the world. I wore a custom gown designed by an artist I'd mentored, deep midnight blue with constellation patterns embroidered in silver thread. I felt like I was wearing the sky. When The Family I Choose went up for auction, the bidding was fierce. 8 million, 10 million, 12. Finally, it sold for $15 million to a consortium of museums who wanted to tour it internationally as part of an exhibition on artistic integrity and resilience. I stood at the podium to thank everyone, looking out at faces that really saw me, for exactly who I was. 5 years ago, I stood in another auction house and watched 7 paintings sell for more money than I'd ever imagined, I said. But the price tag wasn't the victory. The victory was reclaiming my name, my voice, my right to exist as an artist, as a person, as someone who mattered. I paused, emotion catching in my throat. Every person in this room who's supported the foundation, who's fought for young artists, who's believed in the power of truth and justice, you've been part of rewriting what's possible. We've proven that talent can't be stolen forever, that invisible people can become unforgettable, that every ending can be a beginning if you're brave enough to claim it. The applause was deafening. After the gala, after the congratulations and the photographs and the interviews, I went home. Marcus offered to come with me, but I needed this moment alone. I stood in my studio, still wearing the constellation gown, and looked at my reflection in the darkened glass windows. Behind me, paintings covered every wall, my life's work, my soul made visible. In my first life, I'd died invisible, stolen from, broken. In this life, I was E.C. Noctis, Alara Chen, artist, philanthropist, survivor, victor. I thought about the girl I'd been at 14, waking up with memories of a future that would never happen now. How terrified she'd been, how angry, how determined not to let it end the same way. We did it, I whispered to her, to myself, to the universe that had given me this impossible second chance. We won. My phone buzzed again. Another email from another young artist asking for advice, for hope, for proof that they could survive their own family's betrayal. I sat down at my laptop and began to type. Dear Sarah, your story sounds familiar, too familiar. But here's what I want you to know. You are not your family's opinion of you. You are not the worth they assign you. You are the art you create, the truth you live, the courage you find at 3 a.m. when you paint anyway, despite knowing they might steal it. Document everything, protect your work, build your evidence, and most importantly, believe that there's a future where you're standing in your own light, so bright that everyone who tried to diminish you can't look away. I know because I've lived it. Twice. You're not alone. You're not invisible. And you matter. Always, Alara. I hit send and started the next email. This was my purpose now. Not just creating art, but creating hope. Not just saving myself, but helping others save themselves. The night was quiet, peaceful. Through my windows, the city sparkled like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, my family existed in their small, bitter world. They could have had this peace, this joy, this pride in lifting each other up. They chose theft instead, they chose cruelty, and I chose to rise anyway. I pulled out a fresh canvas, picked up my brush, and began to paint. Not from trauma this time, but from joy. A woman dancing among colors, her face tilted toward an unseen sun, her hands open and free. I called it the third act. Because my story didn't end with revenge or victory. It ended with becoming the person I was always meant to be. Someone who'd been broken and remade. Someone who'd been stolen from and learned to protect. Someone who'd been invisible and chosen to shine. The auction had been 5 years ago, but it had been the beginning, not the end, and I was still painting my masterpiece. A life lived on my own terms, in my own light, with my own name in bold letters for all the world to see. Alara Chen, E.C. Noctis. Artist, survivor, free.